Hello to our participants in the U.S. and around the world. We're delighted to bring you today's webinar, Clean Nuclear Energy for Industry, the case for SMRs and microreactors in Puerto Rico. My name is Harsh Desai, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm a senior project manager at Nuclear Energy Institute, and I'm also the past chair of American Nuclear Society's Young Members Group, or YMG. YMG is an ANS professional division consisting over 3,000 early to mid-career nuclear professionals. YMG provides gateway for young professionals to expand their skills and networks, engage in leadership opportunities, recognize peers through awards, and become familiar with governance structure of the society. YMG collaborates with other ANS divisions and committees and encourages its members to participate in activities of these groups that are closely related to their professional interests as well as their local ANS sections. YMG is excited to be co-hosting this webinar today with the U.S. Department of Energy's Gateway for Accelerated Innovation in Nuclear, or GAIN program. GAIN enables the state-of-the-art and continuously improving R&D infrastructure of the national labs available to stakeholders to achieve faster and cost-effective development of innovative nuclear technologies toward commercial readiness. On behalf of the ANS Young Members Group and GAIN, we wish you all and your families good health, and we thank you for joining us today. Welcome to the Clean Nuclear Energy for Industry webinar series, which highlights the innovations in nuclear energy and associated integrated energy options that may be beneficial to a wide range of industrial energy applications. The intent is to develop connections between the nuclear community and the energy end-use community to communicate the benefits of clean, reliable, and resilient nuclear energy. This webinar features the feasibility study led by the Nuclear Alternative Project, or NAP, which is a nonprofit formed by Puerto Rican engineers in the U.S. nuclear industry. This study, highlighting the SMRs and microreactors for Puerto Rico, represents a first-of-a-kind collaborative effort focused on the applications of next-generation nuclear reactors in response to Puerto Rico's pressing energy needs and legislative interests, particularly Puerto Rico's House Resolution 1189. In this webinar, our diverse line of experts will present the study's key findings with special focus on applications for Puerto Rico's manufacturing sector and critical infrastructure needs. So before we hear from our speakers today, let's cover a few logistics. After the panelists present, we will answer questions from you all, or all of our participants. We currently have over 900 people listening live, and I continue to see the numbers going up. So I anticipate we'll have a lot more folks listening in as we continue. Everyone that has logged in as a participant is on mute. So all of you are on mute. If you have a question, please submit it in the Q&A section below if you're using the app or if you're using the web browser or on your iPad or some of the other mobile devices, it will be on your top left. Given the high attendance here, we will try to get to as many questions as possible. The webinar will be recorded, of course, and will be available after the live presentation on both ANS and GAIN websites. NAP will also provide a link to the webinar as well. So let's get into it. We'll kick things off by welcoming our introductory speaker. So let me introduce Dr. Shannon Bragg-Sitton. She is the lead for Integrated Energy Systems, or IES, in the Nuclear Science and Technology Director at Idaho National Laboratory. IES considers how to best integrate or coordinate multiple clean generation sources, such as nuclear and renewables, to meet both thermal and electrical energy demands across multiple energy use sectors. Shannon is also the INL lead for DOE Applied Energy Tri-Laboratory Consortium, which includes INL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, and the National Energy Technology Lab. Shannon holds PhD and MS in nuclear engineering from the University of Michigan and MS from medical physics from the University of Texas at Houston, and BS in nuclear engineering from Texas A&M University. Quite an accomplishment, Shannon. So as many of you know me, I like to always start our panelists with a fun fact about themselves. So Shannon's fun fact is that Shannon started her career working with NASA to design and test what she considers to be the ultimate integrated energy systems that would be used for space, nuclear power, and propulsion systems. Even getting the opportunity to fly and experiment NASA's KC-135 zero-gravity plane as an undergraduate researcher. Shannon, let me tell you, I'm very jealous of your fun fact here. So with that, let me turn it over to you, Shannon.
Thank you so much, Hirsch, for that great introduction. If you'll go into my next slide, Hirsch already gave a little bit of this background that this webinar is a part of a broader webinar series focused on clean nuclear energy for industry. We are introducing some novel applications for nuclear energy in coordination with other energy resources in these integrated energy options. I know many of you have likely joined us for our earlier webinars, but as I see these attendance numbers much higher, I know that some of you, this is going to be a little bit new. So we'll talk a little bit about what we mean by these integrated energy options before we go into our main speakers today from Puerto Rico. The intent of this series is to truly develop connections between the nuclear community that is continuing to innovate and develop new technologies and the energy end-use community beyond just the electrical applications to reach to industrial applications, chemical production, et cetera, in order to communicate the benefits of clean, reliable, and resilient nuclear energy, allowing us to establish a discussion forum on what the requirements may be and considerations and concerns for energy system planning at these end-use facilities. Next slide, please. So we kicked off this webinar back in April, this series back in April, where we introduced what we really mean by integrated energy options and how this can benefit industrial energy applications. And we started focusing in on some near-term demonstrations of integration of nuclear technology, existing nuclear plants, with hydrogen production. These are ongoing projects that are putting steel in the ground in the next 12 to 24 months to demonstrate that nuclear is more than just electricity production, but can also be used to produce other assets as well. In our main webinar, we focused on advanced nuclear technology. If you missed it, that's a great opportunity to come up to speed with some high-level presentations on unique capabilities of advanced reactor technology concepts, highlighting many of their key operational features, options to support industrial users, and potential deployment timelines. So those are all archived on the main website at the provided URL. So I encourage you to go back and look at those slides and webinar recordings. Next slide, please. So for those of you who missed those earlier webinars, I wanted to talk for a few minutes about what we mean by integrated energy systems and how this can be used as a part of our design process when we look at our future energy systems. First, we have to think about what goals we're trying to achieve. In general, we're seeking clean, affordable, reliable, resilient, and sustainable energy systems across a variety of applications and a variety of deployment regions. So we then have to ask, how is that energy going to be used? What are the needs? Is it simply electricity production to support traditional grid applications? Or do we also need to look at support for industrial applications that may require heat or steam? And how will that demand for energy across those different applications vary over time? Only then, when we know that scenario and what those requirements are, can we really begin to assess the role for each energy source, whether that be renewables that might be available in the region, fossil energy, or nuclear energy across a variety of scales of application. Next slide, please. So this brings me to considering integrated energy systems and the program that I'm able to lead on behalf of the Office of Nuclear Energy, where we look at how we can best utilize energy both efficiently and effectively while maintaining all of those other goals that I laid out. So my program comes at this from the nuclear energy perspective, but through collaboration with other laboratories, we also look at the role of fossil energy with carbon capture and sequestration, and renewable energy such as wind, solar, and hydro. And looking at how we best utilize the heat and electricity from those sources to meet needs on the electricity grid, needs in industry. We look at how we might reinvent or redesign chemical processes such as they better utilize these energy sources. And we also take a significant focus on the production of hydrogen and how that hydrogen can be an energy carrier to support many different applications, including steel manufacturing, chemical production, even transportation fuel production, combining captured CO2 with hydrogen to produce cleaner burning transportation fuels. So that's just one of many options that we are considering. When we start looking at remote regions, island applications such as those in Puerto Rico, we also are very interested in clean water production, desalination, and purification to support potable water needs. Next slide, please. When we think about the role of nuclear energy, we look across a wide array of applications, whether that be large light water reactors like our current fleet of plants, similar to the demonstration projects that we highlighted back in the April webinar. And we also look at the role of smaller systems, small modular reactors up to 300 megawatts electric, micro reactors down at the very small scale of a few megawatts. These types of sizes, system applications are very appropriate to smaller microgrids and mini grids, such as those that we'll hear about from our Puerto Rican colleagues. We also look at advanced reactors with regard to how higher temperature systems can better couple with many of these applications. So integrated energy systems has a wide array of application and use depending on how that energy will be utilized by the end user. Next slide, please. So just as an example, I focus here on hydrogen production to give you an idea as to what one of these systems might look like from a conceptual arrangement. In this case, I show a number of different generation technologies that produce electrical energy or thermal energy. That energy is coupled to a user. In this case, I'm showing electrolysis or breaking down water into its base components of hydrogen and oxygen. The traditional means of doing that is steam methane reforming, which is highly emitting, a lot of CO2 produced in that process. By using electrolysis, we avoid some of that CO2 production and can utilize that hydrogen in a number of different applications, whether as energy storage for later production of electricity or to support other users, such as chemicals and fuel synthesis, steel manufacturing, production of ammonia-based fertilizers, etc. These sorts of processes and coupling allow greater flexibility of our generators to meet variable electrical demand. They also provide additional sources of revenue to those generation technologies, such that they can continue to operate at full power, full reactor power, for example, while supporting multiple customers in how that energy is utilized. This gives us options to support grid services, including reserve and grid regulation. But again, this is just an example, and we're looking at many other applications such as carbon conversion and CO2 utilization as well. Next slide, please. I want to provide a little bit of a global perspective in these discussions as well. This is not just a project that is being pursued by U.S. companies and U.S. partnerships, but it's actually a global effort. I want to introduce very briefly the Clean Energy Ministerial, which is a high-level global forum established to promote policies and programs that advance clean energy systems. The overall SEM includes 25 countries plus the European Commission. So this is a fairly large organization that got started in 2010. And in 2018, we launched its first nuclear initiative. This is the Nuclear Innovation Clean Energy Future, or NICE Future Initiative. This was started by the 3 lead countries shown here, Canada, Japan, and the U.S., and includes 8 additional participant countries, as well as a wide array of external partners that you see listed here. And I'm happy to point out that the American Nuclear Society recently joined us as an external partner, and we're excited to have them come alongside us as the initiative explores the potential for nuclear energy uses, innovations, and greater systems integration to accelerate progress toward clean energy goals across multiple regions. Next slide, please. And just to give a little bit greater perspective as to how NICE Future interfaces with the integrated energy systems that I've talked about and what you'll hear from our Puerto Rican colleagues, We recognize in the initiative that clean energy is a goal for all of us, and we'd like to achieve that. But the initiative recognizes that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. In some cases, we need large-scale energy production. In others, such as an island region, we need much smaller systems. We need to support microgrids and mini-grids, and we need to explore diverse solutions, looking at all the generation technologies that we might utilize, including nuclear energy, applied to both electric and non-electric applications to achieve these clean energy systems. So you see our 4 focus areas highlighted at the bottom. On the left top, we see the technical aspects of how do we actually develop and implement these innovative applications of nuclear systems. On the right, how do we engage policymakers and stakeholders? And this varies with each of the different regions and cultures that we're trying to introduce these technologies to. We also look at pooling experience on economics and valuation and market structure, as well as the ability to finance these innovative systems. And finally, communicating the role of nuclear energy in these clean energy systems is extremely important to their adoption in many of these locations. And as I move next now to my last slide, I want to leave you with a question to ponder, a question to consider. Next slide. And what is the role of nuclear energy? How do you envision meeting our future clean energy needs for a variety of applications, whether that be water purification in remote desert regions, naval bases or maritime facilities, industry applications? What is it that we can do in nuclear energy as well as other clean energy technologies to meet these needs creatively, innovative solutions to ensure that we have reliable energy supply? Now I'll turn it back to Hirsch to introduce the rest of our panelists. I'm really excited to hear about what's been going on in Puerto Rico. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon, very much. This was a very good overview. So with that, we now have 3 panelists that will give us an overview of Puerto Rico and the importance of the study. So let me introduce them now. The first that I want to introduce is Luis Reyes. He has more than 40 years of experience in the nuclear industry. He worked for U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission for over 33 years, most recently as the Executive Director of Operations. He holds Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering and Master of Science in Nuclear Engineering from University of Puerto Rico. He's the chair of the Technical Advisory Board for Nuclear Alternative Project as well. So fun fact about Luis is that Luis is a car guy. He's a certified Mercedes-Benz concourse judge. And when he's not involved with a nuclear reactor, he's involved in car quote unquote stuff. So that's exciting to hear. Absolutely. I'm a BMW guy myself, though. I will tell you that, Luis. Let me also introduce the other 2 panelists as well. The next one that you'll hear from is Eddie Guerrero. Eddie is a senior engineer with Arups Energy Group in Houston, Texas, and is the co-founder of the Nuclear Alternative Project. Eddie has over a decade of civil engineering experience in nuclear projects in the U.S. and internationally. He's also a committee member of the ASCE's 4 and 43 standard and the ASME ANF risk standard, and serves as the industry practice advisor for graduate students at the University of Puerto Rico for the program on seismic designs of nuclear infrastructure. He served as member of the Civil Nuclear Trade Advisory Committee, or known as CINTAC, which advises the U.S. Secretary of Commerce on the competitiveness of the U.S. nuclear industry. Eddie holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Puerto Rico and a Master's degree in Structural Engineering from Lehigh University. He holds professional engineering licenses in Pennsylvania, Texas, and of course, Puerto Rico. So a fun fact about Eddie is that Eddie has been painting, let me advance aside, and let me mention his fun fact. His fun fact is that Eddie has been painting Puerto Rican landscapes since he was 8 years old. So check out his latest painting that you see. So Eddie, if you're taking orders, sign me up. I love it, absolutely. So the next presenter that you'll hear after Eddie is Ivan Lugo. Ivan has over 40 years of solid global executive leadership, technical, entrepreneurial, and general management experience. After 21 years of senior management positions, he performed due diligence, audits, and tech transfers in over 30 countries where he built and managed some of the most sophisticated operations. Ivan has since retired to join the Puerto Rico's Industry University Research Center, also known as INDUNIV, so INDUNIV, and participates in several boards and maintains consulting services. As executive director here, he has established the life sciences clusters in Puerto Rico to enhance the industry's competitiveness. So fun fact about Ivan is that he was the first countries that he was assigned to work on as a consultant were the countries that had federal government restrictions because of terrorism. And since no one else wanted to go, he took the risk. He took the risk to the executive leadership positions, and I suppose it has paid off. So with that, let me turn to Luis for your presentation. So Luis, if you unmute yourself and turn your camera on, we'll be able to hear you perfectly.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I want to give you a brief history of nuclear science in Puerto Rico. The history of Puerto Rico is kind of unique in terms of the nuclear science. Can we go to the next slide, please? As you know, in 1946, the U.S. government established the Atomic Energy Commission. And shortly after, the Atomic Energy Commission, can I have the next slide, signed a contract with the University of Puerto Rico. The University of Puerto Rico has been a very active participant in this partnership. And unique to this arrangement, the Atomic Energy Commission provided a lot of equipment and resources. So for those years, you could find in the University of Puerto Rico Nuclear Center the latest pieces of technology and attracted doctoral and postdoctoral students from not only the mainland USA, but from all over the world. And this activity increased every year. At the beginning, it was mostly what we will call today nuclear medicine, and that really presented the strong background of what a nuclear medicine program is today in Puerto Rico. And then it transitioned to other nuclear engineering areas. And I have the next slide, please. By 1960, the Atomic Energy Commission is in a program to try to verify several design strategies. And you need to remember, in the 1960s, we didn't have three-dimensional computer modeling. You were a good engineer if you could use your slide rule and move quickly through the calculations. So the way to confirm any particular technical feature was to build what we will call today a demonstration. And this is a demonstration reactor. So in 1960, you see there on the left a picture of the governor of the island, representatives from the University of Puerto Rico, and the Atomic Energy Commission as a break ground for what's called the bonus reactor. The bonus reactor was a 50 megawatt thermal boiling water reactor that was trying to prove concepts regarding making high quality steam or superheating the steam by recycling it through some parts of the reactor core. The reactor operated until 1964, at which time it was, it started operating in 1964 and then operated until 1968. And at that time, it ceased operations. Can I have the next slide, please? By then, there's a collection of talent in the island from all these activities, and the University of Puerto Rico, very committed to nuclear sciences, develops a nuclear engineering department. This included talent from abroad, PhDs that have moved there to do activities and decided to remain in the island, and engineers from Puerto Rico who went to the U.S. mainland to get advanced degrees in the nuclear sciences. So it was a very robust nuclear engineering department. Of interest was that not only the faculty had international experience, but so did the students. Most of the students were from the island. I happened to be one of them. But at that time, the country of India, for example, was looking into nuclear energy. They didn't have the facilities in terms of universities to provide those teachings to their students. So they would send engineers from India to Puerto Rico to get their nuclear engineering degrees and get the knowledge they needed to go back to India and help develop their nuclear industry. Can I have the next slide, please? At this time, the utility is looking into using nuclear energy for electrical generation. And at that time, it signed a contract with Westinghouse for what's called a two-loop pressurized water reactor of a capacity of 600 megawatt electrics. Now, this is a challenging situation for the island because, as you know, in an island, the electrical grid is isolated. It doesn't have contiguous states like in the mainland U.S., where you could support from another state, from other sources of energy. So a large generating station of 600 megawatts, if it would come out of service, the utility will have to have a large reserve generation to fill that gap. And so that created a challenge in terms of capital to build the nuclear power plant plus capital to build the reserve margin. And it became obvious that at that time the grid was not able to support such a facility. Can I have the next slide, please? In 1980, the U.S. National Academy of Science conducts a study that addresses future energy's alternatives to Puerto Rico. And in that study, the National Academy of Science concludes that it will be a couple of decades before a nuclear power plant can be used in Puerto Rico for two reasons. One, the size. The grid is not needing so much capacity. And it speculates or states that there will have to be smaller nuclear generating stations to be able to be supportive of the electrical grid in Puerto Rico. Can I have the next slide? So by 1990s, early 2000, the U.S. nuclear industry gets presented a challenge. The technicians and engineers who designed and built and operated their nuclear facilities were starting to get to the age of retirement, and there was a need to bring new talent on board. Congress appropriates money to both DOE and the NRC to provide grants to continue to develop the next wave of engineers that are going to be supporting the nuclear industry. The University of Puerto Rico continues to be committed to this science and requests grants to put nuclear engineering courses in the curriculum. And two significant areas that were added. One were nuclear engineering courses for any engineering discipline to take, and also dedicated resources for the civil engineering structural department make a course curriculum and classes on designing the nuclear power plant structures to be supportive of seismic challenges. And this continues for decades, and hundreds of engineers graduate from these programs and move up to the mainland to the U.S. nuclear industry. Can I have the next slide? So in 2015, a number of those engineers, and Eddie will be presenting after me, he's a co-founder, they formed the Nuclear Alternative Project. And this is a nonprofit organization with the main objective to go to the communities in Puerto Rico and teach them, provide them information on the advanced nuclear technologies that are available and will be available as a mechanism to improve the electrical grid and the supply of reliable energy in Puerto Rico. Can I have the next slide? As NAB is doing these activities, there's high level of interest in the island into pursuing nuclear technology for electrical generation. And two key items I want to mention. In the middle of the slide there, you see engineer Ralph Krill, who's now the chairman of the board of directors of the utility PREPA. And early on in his career, he worked in the U.S. mainland in the nuclear industry. And so he has some personal experience from early on in his career. And as a chairman of the board of the utility, he's interested that this technology is considered. And then on the right-hand side there, you see the House Speaker, Gabriel Rodriguez Aguiló, who sets a resolution and hearings about the feasibility of using small modular reactors and microreactors in Puerto Rico. In those hearings, NAB participates, and several questions are brought up that need to be addressed to pursue this option. Can I have the next slide? NAB then approaches the Department of Energy with a proposal to look at the study of advanced reactors to be used in Puerto Rico, and is fortunate enough to receive support from both DOE and INEL to conduct the study. And that brings up to the effort that Eddie's going to cover about the particular study and its finding. So if I could turn it to Eddie for the results of the study presentation.
Thank you, Luis. And thank you, everybody, for joining, and to ANS and GAIN for hosting this. So as Luis mentioned, Harsh, if you can pass to the next slide, please. I'll be then moving on to the details of the feasibility study, what we found. We're going to be sharing interesting aspects, and also applications in terms of the industry and the needs of our industry in Puerto Rico for this particular application. Next slide, please. So as Luis mentioned, during the public hearings of the House Resolution 1189 that took place 2018, there were many questions raised by the local leadership in Puerto Rico. And those questions were very broad in nature. They included the size of the grid in Puerto Rico. They included the legal framework. They included the status of the technology. They included the perception of the communities in Puerto Rico. So our goal, our initial goal with this feasibility study, was to answer those questions right on. We wanted to provide answers as objective as possible and with a technical basis. So that constituted the core of our feasibility study on answer these questions, and then we tackle those questions in 8 specific sections. So most of you may have seen now the publicly available report is divided into 8 sections: a market analysis, a technology assessment, a grid assessment, community perception, recommendations and next steps, assessing the needs, in Puerto Rico, financial aspects, and also the legal and regulatory aspects. This is the core of our study. Next, please. This effort was led by the Nuclear Alternatives Project, NAP, and me personally is one of, in 10 years of career in the nuclear industry, it's been one of my the most exciting projects, mainly because of the team involved. After 10 years out of school from Puerto Rico, it was very exciting to come back, work on a project, applying our technical skills together with people and engineers from Puerto Rico who were my classmates back at the University of Puerto Rico. So this was very exciting for me on a personal level. The team involved more than 30 people in this study. Here's a sketch of how NAP, the Nuclear Alternatives Project, then served as a coordinator of a very diverse team. On one side, NAP was tasked to collaborate and interact as the project moved on with interest groups in Puerto Rico, communities, and leadership. On the other side, NAP was then gaining technical input from the Technical Advisory Board, and also NAP served as the coordinating entity to a group of technical experts and leaders here in the U.S. And a variety of companies, and these included Arup, McCormick Valdez, Excel Services, Pillsbury, Pacific Northwest National Lab, and Murphy Engineering and Infrastructure. Next, please. As I mentioned, one key aspect of our study is that we didn't want to develop this study in the vacuum. We wanted to gain input from the technologies that are being developed, and as well as from market experts. So Luis Reyes served as the chair of the board of this technical advisory board, and here in this org chart you see multiple players and companies from X Energy, NuScale, Westinghouse, GE Hitachi, the Nuclear Energy Institute, and Dr. Amr El-Mashai, a world-renowned seismic expert who provided technical input to our study. Next, please. So let's go to the fun part, the exciting aspects of what we found. Let me start by stating that we did a very in-depth review of the current version of the Integrated Resources Plan, the IRP, from the utility in Puerto Rico. The latest version is the June 2019 version. And we identified right away that there's an urgent need for new generation in Puerto Rico, not just new generation, but base load generation. Puerto Rico plans, the utility plans to retire about 3,600 megawatts of retirements of plants, existing plants for the next 2 decades. The current operational fleet is about 3,200 megawatts installed capacity with about 700 megawatts of reserves. And the latest news from the utility is that for this summer, for the next couple of months, they expect a peak demand of about 3,000 megawatts. It is also important to note that the current IRP version plans to meet renewable portfolio standards of 40% renewables by 2025 for the next 5 years, and plans to install about 1,800 megawatts of photovoltaic and 900 megawatts of battery storage for the next 5 years at a cost of about $3.6 billion. Next, please. One of the interesting aspects is that we understood and found was that Puerto Rico runs on base load power. The nature of Puerto Rico being on an island, being an islanded grid, also in a tropical zone, it provides a very different load profile than in mainland U.S. For example, the peak demand varies roughly 10% from the average utilization. And the load factors is in the range of 75%. This means that demands are always very, very high compared with roughly 60% of the mainland U.S. So the steady high power demand throughout the year and the nature of an isolated grid also adds the need for higher reserve margins, as Luis mentioned previously, that is required in Puerto Rico. Next slide, please. very importantly, when we dived into the IRP, the current version of the IRP, we then identified that the utility established a base case set of assumptions on economic and demand forecasts. These are shown here, okay? And just to give you the details, this base case economic and demand forecast establishes that, number one, Puerto Rico will keep losing population for the next 20 years. This is what the current IRP plan states, in the order of 700,000 people. Puerto Rico, the IRP states that as a base plan. The economy in Puerto Rico, the IRP states that it will remain flat, it will not grow in terms of gross domestic product. And also the current IRP states that for the base case, that the energy efficiency programs and distributed generation will then lead to Puerto Rico to reduce its energy demand to up to 50% of what is current now. So just wanted to make it very clear that the current plan from the utility in Puerto Rico uses this economic and energy demand base case scenarios to establish their plan for renewable energy and LNG for the next 20 years. The uncertainties on whether the economy goes well or not that good will then, the IRP states that will then cover with additional contracts or projects for LNG. Next slide, please. So to put that into perspective, it's good to look back to history and see what the correlation between the energy demand and the economic performance in Puerto Rico. And it's very important to show and to identify that prior the market crash in 2000, the housing market crash in 2008, Puerto Rico's economy was booming. You will see here to your left, the green bars are positive economic indicators of GDP growth on an annual basis from 2% up to 4% annually, and how in the black line that is directly correlated with the growth in energy demand. So this points us, and as we looked into the energy market in Puerto Rico, that if Puerto Rico moves to attract manufacturing, grow its economy, it is reasonable to assume that yes, energy demand will increase as well, and history has shown that. Next, please. This is one of my favorite findings from the study. For many decades, the leadership and people in Puerto Rico thought that nuclear was just too tough because people don't want it. People are afraid of it. People don't want to even talk about it. So in our study, we went ahead in Puerto Rico and we interviewed more than 3,000 people all around the island from all backgrounds. And we found that 94% of them responded on a positive note that they are open to study the option of nuclear power. This was shocking to me and to the team because we were expecting more of a split, 50-50. But no, to our surprise, a lot of people are interested in this new technology. We, of course, went to Puerto Rico. We presented the technology. NAP has been educating and informing the people of Puerto Rico for many years. So this was a very positive finding and unique finding from the study. Next, please. Another interesting finding was that for many years, as Luis previously mentioned, nuclear power was deemed too big. The size was too large for the grid in Puerto Rico. And that was one of the main barriers for the leadership in Puerto Rico to even look at nuclear. So we took that question to the guys at Pacific Northwest National Lab who led the grid assessment task, and also brought together the nuclear vendors like Westinghouse, NuScale, GE Hitachi, and X-Energy, and they shared the details of the technology, and we found that now the new technologies will fit Puerto Rico's grid conditions and also would fit Puerto Rico's planned future for its grid into a split of microgrids and mini grids. And this was a good finding for us to find in the report. Next, please. As most of you well know, Puerto Rico is aggressively looking towards to a high penetration of renewables. So another question was, with such a high percentage of renewables coming into the grid, will SMRs and microreactors adapt well to these conditions? And when we then discussed this with the nuclear vendors, Pacific Northwest National Lab also assessed this condition. We found that in fact, nuclear SMRs and microreactors will possess the flexibility requirements to adapt to such case in Puerto Rico for the level that is planned of renewables, the flexibility, the load following conditions to adapt very well with renewables. What we found is that as the increase in renewables, as renewables percentage increase, this will present challenges, of course, not only if nuclear is deployed, but to any generation source in Puerto Rico. But from our side, on the nuclear side, we saw that SMRs and microreactors, they should have the technology to adapt to this plan, to this future in Puerto Rico. Next, please. Let me talk a little bit about the legal aspect. For many years, there was a common misconception in Puerto Rico that nuclear was banned, was prohibited. And this was mainly due to an executive order that Governor Pedro Rosselló made in 1993 when the economy was booming and there was energy growth in Puerto Rico. And the wording in the executive order said that nuclear was not viable at the time when they were considering energy options. So we had our team and partners in this study, the legal firm Macone Valdez, together with Pillsbury. They looked at the law, they assessed the law, and in fact, we found that nuclear is not prohibited in Puerto Rico. In fact, the current Public Service Act allows nuclear generation companies to do business in Puerto Rico. And this was a very interesting finding that our legal partners found for our study. Next, please. And finally, linking now to the applications in Puerto Rico. Before this study, we saw nuclear as, in a global sense, as being a part of a energy mix in Puerto Rico to provide energy to an island grid. But as we dived into the study, we then identified many applications for SMRs and microreactors, applications that they need energy now, they're in urgent energy needs, applications that are struggling because of cost, high reliance on imported fuels, and they, as we developed this study, they developed interest in the applications of SMRs and microreactors, and we identified these applications in the island, and it served very well for next steps evaluating nuclear in Puerto Rico. Among these applications are critical services, businesses and services that are in the island, including manufacturing and services for the aerospace industry in Puerto Rico. The military fort in Buchanan is the largest military base in the Caribbean. It is located in the metropolitan area in San Juan. We also identified consortiums of municipalities that can also rely on financing mechanisms similar to what has been done here in the mainland U.S. and explore options to adopt nuclear as part of an energy source. Hospitals were also a big application that we identified. Hospitals after Hurricane Maria, they struggle because of access to diesel for their emergency generators. So hospitals were good application points for microreactors specifically. And lastly, but not least, the pharmaceutical and medical device industry, which I'm going to pass now soon to my colleague, my friend, Ivan Lugo, where we identify it could be one of the big players and main players on adopting SMRs and microreactors to really keep the momentum going in Puerto Rico for the industry and help in the struggle in the energy needs right now for such industry. So Ivan, I'm gonna pass it there to you.
Hi, thank you. Can we have the next slide, please? Very good. Well, thank you, Eddie, ANS, GAIN, the DOD for providing us this opportunity. This is a great opportunity, and I'm having connection problem, so I might be only with my voice. But in the next few minutes, you're going to learn more about Puerto Rico and the biggest industry in all the world, and why we need energy reliability and resiliency in Puerto Rico. Everybody knows Puerto Rico for its natural beauty. Nice beach, white sand, rum, but very, very little is known that Puerto Rico ranks among the top 5 manufacturers of pharmaceutical and medical devices in the world. We have more development and manufacturing facilities per square mile than any other place in the world. Please, the next slide. Do you know that Puerto Rico is the largest exporter of pharmaceutical of any state, followed by Indiana with about half of Puerto Rico's export? 8% of the pharmaceuticals sold in U.S. come from Puerto Rico. With 50 years of experience, we manufacture 8 of the top pharmaceutical blockbusters in 46 pharmaceutical plants. We also have 70 medical device and 10 agricultural biotechnology stations here in the island. Some of the products that goes through Puerto Rico represent more of 90% of what is consumed in the world. 10 of the top 20 pharmaceutical companies, as you can see here, and 6 of the top 10 medical device companies operate here in the island. Next slide, please. The industry represents 34% of Puerto Rico GDP and 45% of our industrial sector jobs. Exporting to over 85 countries around the world, it represents 68% of our export goods from the island. Puerto Rico also ranks 7 in U.S. employment concentration of highly specialized jobs. Our plants are among the largest consumer of energy in Puerto Rico. Only one facility pays over $90 million a year just to maintain the energy service. Next slide, please. As you probably know, Puerto Rico all generation and distribution system could not withstand the Category 5 winds of Hurricane Maria. The immediate response was to patch up generators and to stand up poles and cables without the necessary upgrades to build a resilient, state-of-the-art energy system. We demand a reliable, high energy quality and resiliency of a system. Next slide, please. After Maria, our plants were back producing within 2 weeks. Some of the plants operated during the hurricane. It was done because our facility and the experience and the resiliency of our operation have excellent business continuity plan. In order to guarantee that business continuity, Puerto Rico plants had installed power redundancy with emergency generator, photovoltaic farms, and cogenerators to meet the capacity needs for long period of time. We are not, the pharmaceutical medical device industry is not on the generation business. We are doing it because we need to maintain our business continuity and to guarantee the national security for pharmaceutical production. The next slide, please. In support of, you probably have heard, all these issues about after COVID-19 of the need to reshore plants from Asia to the state. So Puerto Rico, in support of the U.S. national security pharma manufacturing strategy, is ready for the reshoring of some of these plants from Asia. Next slide. So the SRM and microreactor connected to local microgrids might be the answer that we need in order to provide a reliable, sustainable, and diverse fuel energy source. We support phase 2 of the NAP study because we need in Puerto Rico to clearly understand the goodness of nuclear energy as it had progressed the technology as we have progressed technology in the world. So I thank you and welcome any question after the final presentation. Eddie, it's back to you.
Thank you, Ivan. Next slide. So just to finish our portion, Harsh and everybody, let's talk very quickly about what's next going on in Puerto Rico. Next slide. We are now close to submitting a proposal to the U.S. DOE on site suitability for the U.S. NRC Red Guide 4.7 for various regions in Puerto Rico. Here now, we will move to address the question from the leadership and communities in Puerto Rico on safety, on where are the safe places to deploy reactors in Puerto Rico. So our goal with this next study is twofold. Number one, we need to address the aspect of safety, the aspect of location, where will be optimal to place with these advanced reactors, and also to provide vendors with where in Puerto Rico is suitable to develop their technologies. This will have multiple objectives. For example, we will be implementing the now newly developed rules for siting SMR microreactors for a place like Puerto Rico. And of course, the main aspect on safety in the island following Red Guide 4.7. Next, please. We're very excited also that this second phase will not be done in a vacuum. We compare with last year, now the number of collaborators and interested parties have increased drastically. So now we have leadership from Puerto Rico that are supporting us. We have the House Speaker, Gabriel Rodriguez Aguiló, in support of this second phase for them to continue the public hearings on feasibility of advanced reactors for Puerto Rico. We have interest from the Energy Commission in Puerto Rico as well on the results of this study. We have letters from Induniv, from the side of Ivan Lugo, that represents the pharmaceutical and medical device industry in Puerto Rico, being collaborating with us, being a partner with us in the next phase. Pharmaceutical facilities will then provide specific energy needs and site descriptions for us to develop our study. And also, we have NuScale, Westinghouse, X-Energy, GE Hitachi, who have said we are present. We're gonna support you. We're in this second phase. with engineering technical details of our technology so we can develop our full integrated approach to site suitability. Next slide, please. So in closing, we, as part of this initial feasibility study, given the feedback, the input, and the results, we developed what will be a timeline for an earliest case scenario deployment in Puerto Rico. If you pass to the next slide, please. And here we have put together two timelines in parallel. Number one, what will be activities that need to take place in Puerto Rico, work in Puerto Rico for deploying advanced reactors. And also in the timeline below, you see efforts that are ongoing, as Shannon mentioned, very exciting activities going on in the U.S. nuclear industry on deploying advanced reactors, demonstration projects, new regulatory rules for advanced reactors. So these two trains are now moving in parallel as we move forward with activities in Puerto Rico. The red arrows that you see over there are then activities that right now are taking place in Puerto Rico with regards to the nuclear discussion. And our second phase study for site suitability is a core aspect of that, of those activities, which will involve the pharmaceutical industry, the regulator in Puerto Rico, the state regulator in Puerto Rico, and the public hearings. So that's it for me. I want to pass out to the next slide for questions.
Thank you very much, Eddie, and certainly thank you to all of our panelists. We have several questions lined up, so let's get to it. But before we do that, let me make sure that I do inform all of our audience members to continue submitting questions. We've received a ton of questions, and we've got a team of folks in the background trying to make all those questions happen. So with that, let me ask all the panelists to turn your camera on so that we can, everyone can see you and you can answer the questions. So with that, let's go with the first question that we've got lined up. So the first question I have, let's start with you, Eddie, and then others feel free to jump in as you wish. So perhaps Eddie and Ivan, but I'll start with Eddie. Does the Nuclear Alternative Project team have insights from the survey into whether the public's interest would change once a nuclear facility is actually proposed to be developed in Puerto Rico versus currently where it is just being scoped at the moment? In other words, would, quote unquote, not in my backyard affect the public's interest?
Harsh, can you hear me well? Okay, so the term "not in my backyard," when we interacted with the public, that was not at all brought up during our surveys. That's a very good question. The key insight, other than the openness, is that there's a level of discontent in the people of Puerto Rico right now, that they are looking for alternatives, they're looking for different ideas. And when we went out to Puerto Rico, we asked these questions on whether nuclear could be an option. People were open to it, okay? And the fact, and the conversations just strictly focus on their needs, what keeps them up awake at night, how people need to balance between paying their electricity bills or their medical bills. This is real stuff that people are struggling with. So when we interacted with those issues, where people open their hearts to us, engineers from Puerto Rico, born and raised, and we share the advantages of nuclear. The notion of knocking my backyard really didn't come up.
Great. Anyone else want to answer that? Or I can move on to the next question.
Yes. I would like to say that the process of education and having very thorough studies is critical, because there is always, as the person that asked the question mentioned, that there is a step process. And in that step process, as people see things closer, some people might feel the nimble syndrome, especially if they're in the specific area where the reactor will be established. So the key here is to be able to have an excellent study in terms of the feasibility and the safety of the new technology, and being able to clearly communicate that to the general public in order to be able to avoid that NIMBY symbol.
Great. Thank you very much. So let me move to the next question. And Ivan, I'm going to go back to you on this one, and perhaps Eddie after you and Luis as well. How can nuclear energy assist a territory like Puerto Rico that experiences severe weather, climate change, and potential seismic and many other risks?
I think I mentioned before thorough study in terms of the safety, worst case scenarios, being able to model clearly what could that be. No one, even in Pennsylvania, where you have nuclear energy, in Florida, in many places are safe to hurricanes and to bad weather. So I think that if we're able to have a sort of study in terms of the safety of these new technologies, now we're not talking about 3 miles island plant, we're talking about small modular reactors, we're talking about micro reactors, we're talking about waste that could take 10 years in order to be able to replace in smaller quantities, and they will be regenerated. So it is a renewable resource. So I think that definitely the piece of understanding and having exciting and appropriate siting where seismic activity is low, where you have a good design of a facility that withstand the worst case scenario of a category 5, as well as earthquake standards that you have in California, you know. So why different in California or Pennsylvania than to Puerto Rico? So I think that it's a matter of how we design, build, and how we are able to model to be able to convince people that this is really a good alternative.
I can add to that, and maybe Luis, you can jump into, but very quickly, I've done risk assessments for nuclear power plants here in the U.S. So I trust that we as an industry, we do have the tools, the best and the highest standards on how to develop these studies, Harsh. So I think our challenge and what we are excited to jump into is how can we take the state of practice of risk assessments and pass it to the community in Puerto Rico in a way that we don't talk about numbers of 10 to the minus 5, 10 to the minus 6 exceedance levels, but we say if something happens, how can this technology prevent a disaster? How can this technology keep us safe? So that's what I will add. Luis, I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Sorry, Luis, you were on mute. Okay, Luis, since you're on mute, I'm going to move to the next question, and hopefully we can work out your mic, and maybe you can address it on the next question as well. So the next question I do have, and Luis, I'll go back to you, and if your mic doesn't work, we'll go to Eddie, which is, does Puerto Rico have adequate security infrastructure to support the implementation of nuclear power? And I don't mean it just necessarily as security, but also as sort of the grid infrastructure aspect of that as well. So let's start with Luis, if we can hear you. No, we can't hear you. So while you're working on that, why don't I turn to Eddie, if you can answer that question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And it's very important to differentiate between the status where we are right now and also where we're going or the plans where we're going. Right now, Puerto Rico is in a very dire state. Its infrastructure needs to be revitalized urgently. That is a straight answer, okay? And the state of its infrastructure is very, very weak. That's one thing. However, on the optimist side, I would like to bring up that there are the federal and state efforts going on in Puerto Rico from DHS, from EDA, from FEMA, from HUD, from DOE, working together in Puerto Rico to push for new infrastructure development. So safety, hopefully, we're hopeful that these efforts will materialize and will help the industry, future deployment in Puerto Rico, as well as the manufacturing industry in Puerto Rico.
Great. I think, Luis, I heard you. So let's turn to you if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, can you hear me now? Okay, just 2 points. In terms of the grid security, the new technologies, one of the big advantages is that they do not need external electrical power or electrical sources of water to maintain the plant safe if there was an event. So the safety of the facility is included in the new design. That's one of the key advantages of the new technologies. In terms of physical security, defending the facility for security reasons, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission license requirements requires this facility to have a security force 24 hours a day, 7 days a week that meet very high standards, and those are tested by the federal regulator. So they would be very, very secure from the physical security, would be separate from any physical security activities for the government, local government.
Great, thank you. So actually, let me kind of expand on this a little bit with Shannon. So I know some of the work that you're doing really kind of focuses on addressing some of the challenges that places like Puerto Rico would have. So anything else you can add on how things that INL or DOE are looking at to kind of address some of these infrastructure issues and how to make this entire integrated energy system work?
Certainly. Thanks, Hirsch. You're right. There's a lot of ongoing research and development within the laboratories, as well as in collaboration with many of the reactor developers and end users, looking at seismic isolation, how we can package these systems to withstand very severe events. This is an ongoing area of research, but we're at that cusp of implementing it and having those types of solutions commercially available. And when we look at how we implement integrated energy systems, we look at a stepwise fashion of looking at how we can do that with current fleet, where we understand and have a very strong operating history with our current fleet systems, and learn what it looks like to co-site facilities, such as a light water reactor with a hydrogen production facility. How do we integrate those electrically? Next step, how do we integrate those thermally? And how do we make sure that we have safe, secure operation of those facilities? All of that groundwork is being laid right now through collaboration between DOE programs and laboratories and industry. That framework, that initial experience will be highly beneficial to these next systems, such as microreactor and small modular reactor implementations that look to do more with the nuclear energy that's provided. And we have new approaches. One comment with regard to security. It was referred to that we have long life. A microreactor typically is designed to have a much longer life core than what we have in our large-scale systems. Some of these designs have a 5 or even 10-year fuel life, such that we don't have to access that core very often, and we don't have security challenges in the course of refueling, but instead we go in, remove that entire cartridge core, take it back to the factory for refurbishment while a new core is installed. So we don't have the same types of operations going around these facilities as we do at our standard large-scale light water reactors.
Thanks for a very thorough answer on that. So I'm going to expand on that a little bit and sort of move us in a different direction, which is, and Eddie, this is for you, which is, why is nuclear energy the right investment for Puerto Rico's energy system? And the reason why I ask is we got a couple of questions specifically asking about Puerto Rico's cost of electricity and power bills, and how can this sort of help that situation, or not just the grid infrastructure stuff, what you mentioned, but essentially for economic prosperity as well?
Yeah, and that's a question that, for example, my parents in Puerto Rico ask me all the time. Hey, we have a lot of solar and LNG here. Why bother with nuclear, right? But throughout this study, we really found that there are key aspects of nuclear that makes it an attractive option for Puerto Rico. Number one, Shannon mentioned, a very good point, the reliance on imported fuel. Puerto Rico right now, there are 2 cargoes of LNG coming in every month, okay? Right now, LNG, that is expected to maybe triple for if plans go on with increasing LNG imports. As Shannon mentioned, microreactors, they have a fueling cycle 5 to 10 years. So that is very, very attractive option when we compare multiple alternatives. The base load capability, 24/7 with clean zero emission energy. When you compare all options of what can provide base load, reliable power, as Ivan mentioned very well, with zero emissions, the option out there is nuclear. So we Puerto Ricans, we protect and we care a lot of our environment in our small portion of land in Puerto Rico, and we care about a lot, and we want to have clean energy in Puerto Rico. And the other one I would mention, Harsh, to your question on economic and why it may be a good investment, is the vulnerability or the volatility of prices, electricity prices in Puerto Rico. Remember, since 1970s, Puerto Rico has supplied 98%, I would say 99% of its electricity from oil, bunker C oil, diesel oil. Okay, when market prices go up, the people in Puerto Rico pay the bills. Okay, so through many decades, this has been a very, very bad situation for Puerto Rico, that people in Puerto Rico are at the mercy of the market, and we identify that nuclear energy is people energy. Nuclear energy, a vast amount of the electricity that is provided by nuclear power doesn't rely on the cost of uranium and the fuel, but relies on the operational cost, the people that generate the electricity, working the plant, doing the research. So I want to end with this, that investing in nuclear energy in Puerto Rico, the portion of investing in fuel is so small. Most of the investment will stay in the island, paying good jobs for Puerto Rico, people in Puerto Rico, to generate that electricity.
That's great. And Ivan, if you can kind of expand on this further. So let's move away from not just necessarily for helping people and helping the economy, but what about some of the other needs? I think you mentioned a little bit about pharmaceutical industry and some of the other industries like manufacturing. Anything else you want to add in addition to what you already presented?
Well, definitely, I believe that as I mentioned clearly, the first step and one of the key elements of Puerto Rico competitiveness as a whole industry is energy reliance and the cost of energy. We pay higher costs than any state in the nation, and definitely that will help our economic development, not to say the housing and the people energy costs that should be stable, that people could rely on, and that the cost should be lower. So there is an expectation that there is going to be a cost effect at the end. So I will say that we need to assure the safety, that we have to assure that this will be part and included in the IRS of Puerto Rico as one of the potential options, and that we have a complete process on how to deploy a good communication plan to be able to avoid any future issues in terms of the implementation of the technology.
Thank you, Ivan. That was very good. response to that. So let me kind of use this to kind of pivot a little bit, since you talked a little bit about how we need to convey to people. So this really adds to public sentiment, right? Edith, you mentioned that the study conducted quite a bit of surveys, and one of your favorite slides was looking at surveys done across the island. So let me ask you this. We got a couple of questions specifically on, talking a little bit about statistics of the survey. I mean, you have a lot of engineers on the call, so they're going to love hearing more about numbers. So what does the sample size look like? What are some of the demographics that maybe looks like? And, if you have any couple of good quotes that you heard, that would be good to hear too.
Okay, that was a loaded question, but I will try to answer as best as I can. Number one, in terms of sample size, we need to remember that Puerto Rico has about 3.2 million people. So in order to ensure a 99% confidence level in the sample size, we determined that about 3,000 people was the right sample size with a margin of error of 2% or so. So that answers your question on why 3,000. Number two, and by the way, we had about 11 pollsters go to Puerto Rico around the island, people from Puerto Rico asking these questions to the people. Number two, I will say that one of my favorite quotes from the people over there that touched my heart is, if the young generation of Puerto Rican engineers want to spearhead this, please include the community. Please listen to us. Please do it right. And that touched my heart outside of the engineering realm, because people are really looking for alternatives. And when we interacted with people, they saw our faces. They saw our dedication to the people of Puerto Rico of bringing this option. That was one interesting quote that I remember. Hopefully, Harsh, I captured your question.
You did, and you did it gracefully. Absolutely appreciate that. So that kind of leads me to the sort of the next level, and this kind of aids to what Ivan was talking about, convincing the safety aspect of that. And I'm glad, Luis, that we have you here, because as many of you may recall, Luis was with U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission 33 years, and most recently you were the Executive Director of Operations. You're about as high as you can go, and you were involved in all facets of Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So the question really here that comes down to is, tell us a little bit more about licensing aspect of that. Licensing in the U.S., the mainland, may be different perhaps than Puerto Rico. And I think you talked a little bit about this before too, but let's kind of hear more about how that might be different, and in many cases it's not.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, the licensing process will be by the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So Puerto Rico, as a U.S. territory, falls under the umbrella of the federal law. In fact, the reactor that used to be there for research for the students had a license. Today, there's a commercial irradiator in Puerto Rico that sterilizes pharmaceutical equipment. And they have a license from the NRC. And of course, the nuclear medicine structure there is also licensed by the NRC, and the NRC sends its inspector. So other than you had to fly over the ocean to go there, the behavior of the regulator and the authority of the regulator is the same in the mainland that it is in Puerto Rico.
That's great. So if I heard you right, what I hear is that we have a precedent in the U.S. of doing this before. We currently already do it, so that we would continue following that process as well. So that's very encouraging to hear. So, we're running short on time. So I'm going to ask, turn this around a little bit and sort of ask sort of one last question for the panelists, and then sort of wrap up. Since we have received over 100 questions, and I know that our team in the background is capturing some of the questions. We provided a lot of the content or ability to connect with all of you, so I'm sure they can reach out separately. But let me turn around and ask you. I mean, this is a study from Puerto Rican engineers for Puerto Rico. So let me turn around and ask you, Luis, let's start with you. What's sort of the last word you want to give out over here to the people that are listening, and people both in the U.S., around the world, and certainly in Puerto Rico?
Well, I think considering the advanced nuclear technologies, it's a unique opportunity for Puerto Rico. If you look at the environmental concerns that they have, the health concerns that they have. Puerto Rico has been burning bunker C for decades and decades. They have a very high index of asthma in children. I, as a child in Puerto Rico, suffer from asthma, so I'm personally aware of that. And then, of course, the key enabler of new technologies for pharmaceutical and other manufacturing to improve the life of the community. So I think it's a unique opportunity that needs to be seriously considered as the future of the island.
Great, that's excellent. Let me turn to Ivan. What do you think? Your last word.
I believe that we have a great opportunity in our hands. Okay, we're at a changing time, and we are overlooking that the most important thing that we have in our life is health. And Puerto Rico, through our industry, supply most of the confidence for you to have excellent quality of life through the products that are produced in Puerto Rico. So if I tie that in order to do anything, we need energy. Energy is, and clean energy and sustainable energy and diversified energy is critical for an island that depends only on what is brought in to the island for energy because of the transshipment modes that we have. So we look forward for the completion of these studies in order to be able to assure that we have another option to the ones that we are already implementing to make Puerto Rico a more resilient place in the world and perfect to continue growing the pharmaceutical and medical device sector.
Thank you. Eddie, let me turn to you.
Thank you, Harsh, and thanks for the opportunity. This has been great. My last word will be this. It's a message that I've been passing along for many, many years. If Puerto Rico should look for an energy mix not only to survive, but it should look for an energy mix to prosper, to grow. And when we look at all the alternatives, nuclear energy can be part of that future and can be part of that vision to prosper. And I will say in Spanish, I will now change it to Spanish, my message to all the engineers from Puerto Rico working in the U.S. nuclear industry. Nosotros somos muchos y tenemos el poder de hacer esto una realidad. Así que vamos a trabajar duro y podemos hacerlo. Just for your sake, Harsh, I said we're a lot of engineers out there from Puerto Rico who are passionate about the technology and care about bringing Puerto Rico together. So thank you.
Well, I will tell you this. I speak a little bit of Spanish, un poquito español, and I heard maybe every fourth word. So I'm glad you translated that for me. So one thing I did want to highlight is, having read the report, a lot of the questions that we did receive, they are actually answered in the report itself. So certainly you can reach out to Eddie, Luis, and even Ivan, and a lot of the folks that are helping in the background, but a lot of the questions are answered. So with that, let me turn to Shannon for your last word.
Thank you very much, Hirsch. And I love Eddie's final statement there. Nuclear is not just about surviving, but about prospering and growing. And I think that's fantastic. And we've talked a lot about how nuclear can provide that reliable baseload and be a sustainable energy supply for that. But I want you to think about it even beyond just that baseload, and how nuclear energy can also support flexible power needs, flexible energy needs. And through that can be an incredible coupling technology with renewable energy. We're not talking about choosing between solar and nuclear or wind and nuclear. We're talking about how do we use them all effectively together to ensure that we have reliable energy supply for the electricity grid, and for growing manufacturing industries, pharmaceutical industries, water purification, et cetera. And I want to leave you on the last statement. I'm scrolling through the questions. I saw a couple on, are these systems really real? Are we really going to do integrated systems? We've heard about this. They're real. We're partnered with 4 utilities in the United States that operate current fleet plants. These demonstrations are on the way. They are going to be steel in the ground very soon. So these are real systems. And we see advanced reactors, 2 of which will be demonstrated at Idaho National Laboratory by 2025. This is a demonstration program that will launch us forward into the future of how we deploy new nuclear systems to meet all of these goals that we've laid out. So I'm really excited to see Puerto Rico moving in this direction. I think this is fantastic and an opportunity to prosper, and I hope to see it in many other locations as well. So thank you very much to all of you for joining, and please reach out to us if there are some questions that you still have.
Well, thank you very much, Shen, for your last word. I will tell you this from my personal perspective. I've learned a lot, even just hearing from you all. And if there's anything I took away is Puerto Rico is a fascinating place to be, and it has a great history of nuclear power, and there's a lot of potential opportunities for what it can be there in the future. And I'm very excited for what the future holds in Puerto Rico. So the last thing I want to end you with is that up in our next YMG's upcoming events are 3 spotlight on national labs. These include Pacific Northwest National Lab, Lawrence Livermore National Lab, and Oak Ridge National Lab. We also have a virtual networking happy hour and trivia plan. For those of you that participated in our previous trivia, they're a ton of fun. So hope you are able to join that. And again, mark your calendars. Stay tuned for more details on how to join these things from ANS. And with that, I do want to thank you again, the panelists. I want to thank you again as the audience, and certainly all the folks that made this happen in the background, from GAIN, Nuclear Alternative Project, ANS Young Members Group, and everyone. So with that, we wish you a great week ahead and great weekend. Thank you.